Hey everyone, this is Maregal Ben Yaakov. Welcome to my YouTube channel, or if you're watching on Facebook, welcome to my page. This week I am going to try to discuss in detail the Sabbath or Shabat in biblical Judaism and not according to rabbinical Judaism. The word Sabbath or Shabbat is listed 76 times in the Jewish scriptures, the Tanach, or what Christians call the Old Testament. And the word Sabbath is listed about 35 times in the Jewish scriptures. And they talk about a wide range of things, what to do and not to do. And so we're going to discuss that. And then there's other things I'm going to discuss how to apply them in a modern setting versus the old setting, which they were written, because the Torah we have today was written around 390 BCE. And if you don't understand that concept, why I'm saying that, check out my series, my 3-video series of why I left biblical Judaism. And you can see why I say the Torah, what we have today, was written around 390 BCE, after the time of Nehemiah and stuff. But nonetheless, I want to talk about how to practice biblical Judaism in a modern setting and with all these laws, to deal with in a modern society. And a lot of people may not realize this when like in the Christian world, they read the Sabbath is part of the Ten Commandments. Yet practically most of Christians don't practice or honor the Sabbath at all. In fact, they don't even know what day it is. They think, because of traditions, they think Sabbath is Sunday, their day of rest. And some people actually don't work on Sunday and don't do any business and things like that, thinking that's the original Sabbath, part of the Ten Commandments. When in fact, if we're going to use the Gregorian calendar, it starts at sunset on Friday evening, whatever time of the year it is, because as you know, in wintertime, sunset could be around, excuse the background noise, I'm at my carving shed where I do all my stone carvings. Anyway, sunset in wintertime in Hot Springs, Arkansas, granted it's varies from place to place depending on where you're at and longitude, latitude. But here in Hot Springs, it's around 4:55 in the afternoon. In the winter, like let's say around December 21st, which is the shortest day of the year. And then it could go past, then in June, like on June 20th, sunset is around, I don't know, 8:40, somewhere around there. It's really late. Plus they do the time change, daylight savings time junk here too, so which I hate. Nonetheless, so you have to understand when is sunset for your area, and or the 24-hour period. Now in Alaska, you might be all jacked up and where it could be daylight for 3 months or so, whatever the case is up there. And so you have to figure out, I would not even live up there if I was a Jewish dude. It'd be so mind-boggling up there. So, I mean, you would have to have like instead of a 24-hour Sabbath, you would have to almost have a 26-hour Sabbath just to keep it kosher, but anyway, let's get back to what I was talking about. So you have to so the Jewish Sabbath starts at Friday evening at sunset, and we always stop, right before sunset. I mean, unless you could actually bluntly see the sun itself, you could still technically work on Friday. If you could see the sun, like if this is sun going down the screen, if it's still, right here, you can still work, but you're pushing it. So, because a lot of times, if you ever time the sun, depending how big it is and all like that, based on the, the vapor in the atmosphere, from like right here to right here could take between 2 minutes and 4 something minutes. So it's kind of unique if you ever seen that before, timed it. Anyway, so it goes from Friday evening at sunset till Saturday evening after sunset. And so it's just basically a tradition too. This is rabbinical, but it's kind of a good rule to have. Typically, you wait till you can see 3 actual stars in the sky, and then you're like, yeah, it's kosher now, and we can now work again. And so 3 stars usually pop up 30 minutes after the sunrise. Yeah, or excuse me, after the sunset. So if you don't know the sunsets in your time, go to like a website, don't know the name, there's probably several of them, but type up sunset by zip code, and then you know your area when the sun will set. Then just then quit all your work half hour before sunset, and don't start your regular week again until like an hour or 30, 40 minutes after the Sabbath. So anyway, nonetheless, a lot of people, like I said, the Christian world don't understand it's actually Saturday, like the Seventh-day Adventists. They know what day it is, but the thing is they don't technically keep the Sabbath. And I might get into that. And a lot of my Jewish brothers don't keep the Sabbath according to the biblical text. And for those of you who may not be aware, but the Sabbath is actually a capital offense crime. If back in the day during the theocracy period, is a capital offense crime, and so those who break it is worthy of that offense, as long as there's 2 or 3 witnesses seeing you commit the transgression. In fact, there's an incident, I believe, in Numbers where in Numbers, now the story doesn't say why he does this, just simply says he does it. So some dude is like gathering sticks on the Sabbath, and so some people saw him and snatched him, took him to Moses. What's going on? Or not like that, but what are we supposed to do with this dude? And the Lord supposedly said, stone him to death. And so that's what they did. They stoned him to death. And I'm not sure where that is. Let's see, maybe Leviticus or Numbers 15, somewhere around there. But so it talks about, like in Exodus, do not kindle a fire on the Sabbath day. So that in modern times, that could be a whole wide range of stuff, okay? And in Amos, now you don't find this in the Torah, but you find it in the other writings, like in Amos and in Nehemiah. But you are not allowed to conduct business on the Shabbat or Sabbath. Yet, like I said, you won't find any of this in the Torah itself, so we kind of see that a guy named Moses couldn't have written the Torah just by that alone, because it's missing. Because you would think that a dude who took the time to write all these commandments, not just 10, but like 6, the rabbis say there's 613 commandments. Now, I don't know that by confirmation. When I wrote all the commandments out, I got over like 920, but I didn't delete all the repetitious ones, because you could read like the 10 Commandments twice, like one in Exodus 20, the other one in Deuteronomy 5, and you could kind of get a makeshift kind in Leviticus 19, and so, yeah, like do not worship idols, it's probably in there 1,000 million times, and so, anyway, so it goes, so the Sabbath is, gets pretty detailed on some. Now, when the legend of the manna was coming down, the people saw that there's more than normal in the regular 5 days, Sunday through Thursday, but on Friday there seemed to be double the amount. And so the people were like, what's all this? Why is there so much more? He goes, oh, tomorrow's the Shabbat, or Sabbath. He says, gather up double. And so you could have today's portion, and then you have some for tomorrow's portion. And so you're not allowed to cook on the Sabbath 24-hour period, or that time frame, if, you know, sunset to sunset. So Moses says, cook what you need to cook for tomorrow and lay it aside. And, you know, maggots won't get in there because it's a sign, you know, it's the Sabbath. And that is ordained. But, so anyway, you're not allowed to cook on the Shabbat. You're not allowed to do vain work or work that's unnecessary. Yeah, might get into that, you know, like I said, as far as the dude collecting sticks, it does not say what it's for, nor what time of year this was. Not that it makes a difference, but let's say if it was wintertime in the desert, as you know, if you ever been to a desert, at least me in California, that the days might be like 70, especially when the sun is beating on you. You know, it might be 75, 76, you're nice and warm, take off your shirt or your outer layers, and all of a sudden it drops down to 39, you're like, ooh. So anyway, so we don't know if he was collecting sticks for making, you know, frames for his little teepee or hut or tabernacle he is staying in, or making carrying things, or to stay warm, or to cook with, you know, whatever. It doesn't get into that. Just get up, you know, because he did it during the Sabbath hours. And so anyway, so you're not allowed to cook. You're not allowed to, you know, kindle a fire. So why would Jewish people and like who drive a car, you know, it's just like, let me back up. Okay, it says you must not kindle a fire on the Sabbath. Well, that goes into all areas. And so not just for cooking, heating your house or yourself, or barbecuing, or whatever the case might be, or for light, you know, kindle a fire just so you could have an oil lamp in the back, and or a candle. You can't do any of that. And so not during the Sabbath hours, that is. You can do it like if Sabbath is 5 minutes from now, starts in 5 minutes, like it's at sunset. Yeah, like it's, say sunsets right now, it's like 12 o'clock in the afternoon right now, but if sunset's about to happen in 5 minutes from now, I could light up all the fires I want, like light all my oil lamps, my candles, you know, my furnace, you know, if I have a wood furnace, you know, put wood in there now, and to kindle a fire so I can stay warm. Then I'll have to deal with the rest later when it goes out. You know, put on a coat or extra layers, but in the meantime, I'm going to use firewood. So anyway, what was I talking about? So in modern times, just by that commandment alone, you're not allowed to drive a vehicle. Why? Because it burns. You know, there's a fire ignition from the spark plug, explodes the gas, and your car goes, and so you're not allowed to do that. That's without even getting into all the unnecessary things you're not allowed to do, like pick up keys, you know, open up a car door. You're not allowed to do any of that, and so let alone drive it. So anyway, so doing this in a modern lifestyle, we'll get into that, and like in Amos 8 verse 5, no business on the Sabbath day, or in Nehemiah somewhere around 9 or chapter 10, something like that, not to not to do business on the Sabbath day. So how does this work? Okay, in modern life, if I'm out in the country, you know, and I have all my power off, things like that. Let's see, how would I say that? Okay, if I live out in the country, and I'm just I have a regular modern house, whether a house, condo, apartment, whatever like this, I cannot conduct business on the Sabbath. So a lot of houses have a water meter, gas meter, water, gas, and electric. Well, before sunset, before the beginning of the Sabbath, before sunset, you have to turn all those meters off at the meter, because if that thing is spinning, you have to pay, and that's a business transaction, okay? And you cannot conduct business during the Sabbath. So me and my family at the time, when I was practicing, that's exactly what we would do. We would turn off the meter, and so we would do kind of like the manna deal, you know, because that's commanded. You do all your prep work before Sabbath, so you do all your cooking, you know, before sunset. You pour out all your water in the glasses where they need to be, and set your table, blah blah blah, because you can't prep a plate either. You have to have everything done. And so so we had like the glasses, you know, I got used to what I'm going to drink, so I would have like maybe, I don't know, 6 glasses of water, you know, for me, because I didn't drink that much. And so anyway, so every time I'm thirsty, I just pick up that glass, I put that glass down, and I'm done. I don't take it to the sink, not to be clean, because some Hasidic people will do just that. They'll put it in the sink. You cannot carry, you know, according to like the, you know, the umph of the Jewish Sabbath laws, is you cannot do anything unnecessary, okay? And it's not necessary to go put empty dish in a sink or anything. You have to just, once you're done, you're done. And just let it lie there. I mean, that might seem extreme to a lot of people listening, but hey, that's what it is. And so, or like even carrying a book. I cannot carry a book from, you know, here to all the way over there, then sit down and read it. No, if I'm allowed to read a book, but it can't be vanity books on the Sabbath. You know, it has to be more educating books. So there's laws, or kind of oral laws, self-oral laws, and I'll be getting into that too. And what I mean, some people might be wondering, you cannot add or subtract. Well, that's not the case. That's not true. You know, a lot of Christians might be thinking that, well, this is not Christianity, this is Judaism. Besides, Christianity is talking about revelation for that book alone, and it's talking about if anybody takes anything out of this prophecy, let him be cursed. And so, and besides, the book of Revelation, the author was never meant to be grouped together with a bunch of books and being at the end either. He didn't predict that, and he's talking about all the rest. It's not what he's talking about. He's talking about his book alone. And that sometimes was a common practice for that time frame, to do that. And for authors to do that, you know, because a lot of people were probably getting tainted, you know, they rewrite, take things out at will or whatever. And so, but there's a commandment, I might put it right here later on, but there's a commandment in the Torah that in generations to come, like when Moses dies, you know, that if there's a thing like a rule, you know, the judges of the land, because there's judges who are supposed to be at each town and city, if there's a thing too difficult for them, they go to the main priest, you know, and they seek the main priest out, and he has I don't know, Thummim and Urim. Yeah, Urim and Thummim, and he prays and does this kind of kosher divination. He finds a ruling from the Lord, you know, Hashem, and they set a new precedent or law. And so, like cars didn't exist back then, but they do exist now. Someone might say, well, according to the Sabbath laws, everything is supposed to rest. You, yourself, your slaves, and your animals. So, well, you know, so if I have my animal has to rest too. I obviously can't ride them to synagogue. So obviously, why not a car? Because there's no one being burdened by it. You know, it's just me. It's like, well, that's where you kindle a fire with a car or vehicle. What about electric car? You know, you might have a spark, you know, to a point. Can't do sparks because spark is fire. But nonetheless, that's again high technical. But a car has nothing to do with necessity. You're supposed to rest and relax. And now there's an oral law about you cannot travel so far. That's not biblical, but if you know the umph of the Sabbath laws, you kind of get the gist when you're practicing it. Not a scholar looking in, but one who's practicing it. You know, it's like, okay, if the main umph is what's the whole point of Sabbath? It's for remembrance of creation, or when you're slaves in Egypt, and so it commemorates that. You know, while as slaves you weren't allowed to rest, so now you're commanded to rest. And what's the point? So to be refreshed for the following week. It's like God worked, in 6 days he made the heavens and the earth, and on the seventh day he rested and was refreshed. And you gotta mix mythology in there, because back in the day they believed that God was a physical being, but a superhuman. Basically, he had that form. This is the old school mentality, mythology. He gets tired, he can forget. Like, he remembered Noah, or he asked, "Where are you?" about Adam and Eve. That's the old mythology, not what you see today. He's omnipresent and all-knowing and things like that. You can't apply that today, okay? And or like the Maimonides time frame, he has no image, when God does have an image in biblical Judaism. He is a physical man, but a superman, a superhuman in the sky somewhere. So if you were to go up, you eventually see him. That's the mythology. Okay, so trying to get to biblical Judaism here. Okay, so I don't even know what I was talking about, but yeah, there's lots of things to talking about adding to the law. So he sets a new precedent. So you can add to the law if it does not contradict the existing commandments, and it helps bring things up to par, not eradicating the Torah, but adding things like in more precise detail. Like I said, there's no vehicles back in the day, no planes, no trains, so you can't do any of that during the Sabbath. It's like, but there's things you can get around stuff if you're smart. Okay, like say if I have, I don't know. Let's see here. Say this is a solar light, okay? This is a solar light, and I don't want to use oil lamps or candles, okay? And especially if there's kids around. Yeah, we live in the modern age. Obviously, we have solar lights now for your garden. This is what I did. I bought quite a bit of solar lights at Walmart and at Lowe's or Home Depot, whatever the case is. Put them out in the yard and just used them during the week in the yard. But when Sabbath came around, I would bring them in like 10 minutes before sunset and place them strategically throughout the house, and these lights would literally last throughout the night, 12 hours or 10, close enough. And so I could, if I need to go to the restroom, and I'll even get into that later on, but because that's technical too when it comes to having your utilities turned off. But anyway, I'd have these lights strategically placed so I could make my way outside or whatever. So there's things you are allowed to do and not allowed to do based on necessity, because the whole point of the Sabbath is to rest, to gain strength for the following week and for memorial. So you cannot do anything to exert yourself. So, that's what I was talking about. Also, when you are living the Torah, you know, practicing it, doing it, you're like, oh, okay. Like in the New Testament, you just use the New Testament, for example. After Jesus supposedly ascends to heaven, it says they were a Sabbath day's journey from the Mount of Olives, right? Okay, chapter 1 or chapter 2. I might put it right here. But it says there's a Sabbath day's journey. You know, it's like one guy said, it's not like it would take all day to get back to where they wanted. No, in Jewish law, they made a decree you cannot walk beyond a certain length, because then it would be considered work. And so, but those who are biblical Judaism and not rabbinic, it's not necessary. I don't believe that. I don't believe in this space. But if you go by the umph of what's being said in the Torah and the Tanach, the point is you cannot exert yourself. So you could, so you can't walk any length whatsoever if it makes you tired or worn out. You need a drink, because you're defeating the whole purpose of the Sabbath to begin with. And so you can't just go hiking. If you live, you know, out in the country, you just want to go hiking, then you get worn out. You can't do that. So, and this is factored by person to person, from person to person, okay? And I'm obviously, I'm already started talking about the Sabbath, so just kind of got into it. But anyway, so like if I'm in shape, I might be able, without catching wind, without needing a drink, without being exhausted, I might walk a mile, you know, or quite a bit, half a mile, you know, just go up the road, because at my country home, I would, you know, from the bridge to on top of the road was like 900 feet. And so I just go walk slow, blah, 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 and take my time, look at the flowers, wildflowers that would grow on the side of the road, and come back. And come back, and that would be, you know, that'd be one walk trip for me, you know. But someone who is overweight, however, they may not make it, they can make it down the driveway, but they may not be able to make it up the driveway, okay, without huffing and puffing, breaking a sweat. And so for someone who's out of shape and overweight, you have more restricted lifestyle on the Shabbat, okay? And that's just being frank talk. So it's regulated, you know, from person to person. And this is just fact, you know, because like I said, the whole point of the Shabbat is to gain strength for the following week, and you are commanded to rest. I mean, you could, you know, entertain yourself. You could go out a little bit, you know, like that, but you can't drive, you can't ride a bicycle, you can't skateboard, you know. And this is like modern stuff, you know, and you can't, I mean, you could jog a little bit, I mean a little bit, you know, like maybe 20 feet or something, because you're just fooling around. But you can't just, you know, exercise. Can't exercise that too, you know, so. So it gets all into that. So so you have to do all your prep work of cooking and your drinks, what you want, before you lay it all out before Sabbath starts, and this is what you feast on for the rest. So it gets kind of unique from person to person, or from food to food, I should say, because, and also based on season, because if you want good food to last, that is, throughout the whole entire 24-hour, 26-hour Sabbath period, I say 26, the reason because you quit, like, maybe, depending, you know, half hour before sunset, unless you can see the sun, like I say, and then you wait for the 3 stars, and there's certain other oral laws too. I might get into that later. But so like it could be 25, 26 hours. So if you want things that'll last, like baked potatoes, they last. Pizza lasts. You know, everybody likes you know, pizza, whether cold or hot. Lay it out for a while, might get a little dehydrated, but nonetheless, you find stuff that will last. You know, like say for me, I love Mexican food. Okay, and so I knew what things to do and not to do, and what will enhance the food to spoil faster. Like say for example, if I like refried beans, which I do, and or just even black beans, this whole black beans cooked, they will last quite a good while. You know, as is, you know, the refried beans might get a little crusty and all that, but nonetheless, but like say the whole beans, they'll last a good long time. Now if I put cut tomatoes in there, oh, it'll be wasted by 11. They'll start fermenting literally by 9 a.m. Sabbath morning. So anyway, and if you don't want that, don't put that in there. So just lay them on the side. You know, it's better just eat some beans and put a tomato in your mouth. Do it that way. And so obviously, and you can't harvest anything during the Sabbath, because that is unnecessary, because there's a philosophy you have to say. You know, how did I word it back in the day? You know, I quit when it was in 2014, 2015. Excuse me. Here it is, 2022. So it's been a while. But there's a certain saying I would teach the kids, and says, anything that you can do before the Sabbath, you're not allowed to do during the Sabbath. And anything that you can, that is, the word can is the main word. Anything that you can hold off till after the Sabbath, you have to hold off till after the Sabbath. Okay. Now some things you can't avoid, like let's say bathroom, can't avoid that. So you have to pick up something to clean yourself a little bit. So that's kind of more the necessity type of thing. Food you're allowed to pick up. A cup you're allowed to pick up. Now a bowl, no. The bowl could stay on the table and you just eat right out of a glass. Yes, you could pick up a glass because that's more necessity. See, this is how high detailed, you know, it can go. But I'm telling you in practical form, okay? So now, okay, I'm not allowed to personally cook during the Shabbat, right? Okay. So, but if I have, like, now I did this. See what I do. I would have, like, say, I would have coffee laid out. We'd pour out, like, I would have maybe 4 cups of coffee. So, before Shabbat would start, I would pour out my 4 cups of coffee. And so when I want one, I take this cup, I'm done. Then I get another one later, and that cup is done. I don't touch that cup no more. I mean, you cannot take an empty cup and go, not during the Sabbath, because that's prepping that cup. So that's how stupidly detailed this is, you know, but that's what you gotta deal with. So anyway, but let's say I have a wood furnace, okay? You could kind of cheat to a certain degree. You could go like this. Like, you could either have a metal cup, and you could have it with, you know, coffee in there, and have it on a wood stove, you know, lightly, or something that keeps it warm, like that, for a period of time. So this, like, camping cups that are stainless steel, that type of thing, you could pick up that stainless steel one. If it's not blazing hot in your hand, pick it up and you could have warm coffee. That's a type of cheating where you're not bluntly going out of your way to cooking it. It's already being cooked. You see what I'm saying? And so there's ways to do stuff. And now in some rabbinic circles, you're not allowed to blow out a candle. That's malarkey. I don't believe that at all. So if you are like we'd have candles for a long time, like these big. They weren't emergency candles, but they were long lasting, like about this big, you know, like that, about that tall. They were kind of white, and they would last 2 or 3 Sabbaths. And and every time I go to bed, I just blow it out and just use the oil lamps instead. And sometimes I would blow out the oil lamps because it's now, you know, just have a few on just to lightly light up the house, you know, when you go to bed. And so you just blow out the rest. You know, besides having the solar lights in the strategic places, like in the kids' room, I would have solar lights in there. I wouldn't put oil lamps in there. And you could also use plug-in battery flashlights. Those are always cool too, because that will be bright. So you just, you know, you just charge it throughout the whole week. Then when you know, 10, 15, 20 minutes before Sabbath, turn them on and just let them burn. You know, you can't go and turn it off during the Sabbath hours, but you just let it burn out or run out. So there's all these techniques. And so also according to like some of the Torah, there's laws like in Ezekiel of what the prince is supposed to do, you know, at the temple. We don't have to deal with the temple because the temple hasn't existed for a long time, but there's commandments. Now the priest is the only dude who is pretty much working and ordained to work during the Sabbath hours, because he has to sacrifice animals. This is old school thinking. Sacrifice animals, you know, separate all the parts, wash the parts and put them on the altar, arrange the wood, you know, then put oil in the menorah that burns continually and things like that. And so he is the most busiest dude around, is the priest dealing with the temple stuff. And so he is the only guy, you know, that has to work. And maybe priests who stand guard over the temple complex, because the treasures were in there, you know, all this gold and silver and things like that. So you have guards and stuff, and that's a whole big deal too, about police and things like that. How much can they work? And so just kind of have to get into that. And this is where, like I was saying, you have to add to the Torah because it's simply not in there. Okay, I'll give you another example of something that's not in the Torah, but you know it should be in there. Okay, it says nowhere in the Torah you must not commit arson. You know, regardless if you want to use the old school, like you must not. Let's use more old school if the word arson didn't exist. And it's like, you must not deliberately catch your neighbor's house on fire. Okay, yeah, that's kind of a no-brainer, but nonetheless, it's still not in there. So this is like one example of a law that you could put in the Torah that would be now considered oral law, but it's kosher oral law. You know, it's not like goofball. Like nowhere in the Jewish Torah or any of the scriptures it says you have to bake challah bread, you know, eat challah bread, have wine, and light 2 Sabbath candles. You know, that's not Torah stuff, and it has nothing to do with law. That's tradition stuff. But then they, you know, among rabbinic Judaism, just so mainstream now, they think it's Torah observance. You command this, you know, it's like when you do the, you know, Kiddush, you know, and he said, it's just like, you thank the Lord commanded us to kindle these lights. He didn't say that at all, nowhere, you know. And there's just a tradition because there's 2 different Sabbath commandments, or it's named, or the 10 commandments is listed twice in the Torah, you know, one Exodus 20, the other one Deuteronomy 5, and so they have 2 candles. But like Hanukkah, you know, the miracle of the oil not running out, you know, because they only had enough for one day. That's nowhere in the book of Maccabees. at all. The story is they celebrate for 8 days. Not that oil lasted for 8 days. They celebrate for 8 days, just like the Feast of Tabernacles. They celebrate for 7. Then there's an extra Sabbath on the 8th. So there's 8 in total, you know. So that's why they, according to the book of Maccabees, that's why they celebrate for 8 days. So the whole different deal when you get to the biblical text versus this oral tradition, okay? So I was always a biblical Jew, not a rabbinical one. And so I'll always teach by the biblical text, not rabbinical stuff. I can't get into that. So anyway, there's a lot of times this right there, the Sabbath, the word Sabbath is mentioned in the Tanach, and then Sabbath is mentioned in there, and I'll try to get more detailed in there. But this is pretty good. I think I got quite a bit talked about, but this will give you some homework, and maybe I'll go, you know, write these out a little bit more and talk about them in more high detail. But I got pretty much kind of got them wiped out, and we could talk about this like the New Testament. Okay, let's talk about the New Testament for one moment. Okay, Jesus said something. If your ox falls into a ditch, will you not pull him out? Okay, something like that on the Sabbath day. And, okay, that's why I'm going to get more precise, okay? Now, the scenes, I was horrified when I read this and read in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I'm kind of wondering if Jesus was addressing the scenes here. Because in the Dead Sea Scrolls, basically if your animal falls into a ditch, they wrote, just leave them there. And who cares? And it's not who cares, but you get the drift. They just make a joke here. But no, they said just leave them there. And I think they even talk about if you're a slave or something. I would have to confirm that. I don't even know how I can confirm that. But because I had a book back in the day, had you know, some writings on the Dead Sea Scrolls, like it all translated and stuff. So anyway, so I'm not sure if it talked about people like a servant or your brother falls in. You know, but definitely did talk about the animals. So if the animal falls in, they just said leave them there. Okay, this is where I would myself, like if I am a priest or a judge in ancient Israel, because I had to deal with this on my farm. Okay, all the time, and I hated it. So eventually, I just got rid of my goats because didn't want to deal with them during the Sabbath. Okay. And so, and in general, because they were kind of a pain in the neck. A lot of times. Fun and adorable, but pain in the neck. So, for me, this is how it go. If your animal, like, falls into a pit, I guess they caught wild animals that way. Back in the day, they make a pretty good pit and put, like, light brush over there and cover it, you know, to a certain degree so it looks like normal ground, and may put food around or in the pit or something, or on top of the soft layer so an animal will come and they just fall in there. They got a wild gazelle or something. And or like a well or something, like maybe a hand dug well if your animal falls in there or something like that. I would judge of when the animal fell in there, okay? Because that would make a whole difference on towards genuine keeping the Sabbath holy, you know, without working, without laboring unnecessarily and necessary, okay? So let's say your animal falls in the first 12 hours, which is at night, and all the way up to like during and some part during the day. Yeah, you could pull him out, you know, because there's no water or food down there, and you don't want him sick or die or get scared or keep trying to jump out and exhaust himself, literally to death. And so, like that. However, big however, if your animal falls into something like, let's say, a dry pit, not a well where there's water, that's a big difference there, okay? So let's keep it, because this is where you have to use, like as a judge, how you would, here's this law for that, this law for that, and that law for this. So you have to get right into this meat of detail. You have to, because these situations actually happens. You know, a whole bunch of stuff happens that you don't want to happen during the Sabbath, okay? Or like, say, your neighbor's house. And, you know, I made this oral law among the family and among the sect I created, you know, a biblical Orthodox sect, Mythology. And, but let's delve into this for a second, okay? If your animal falls into a dry pit that was meant to capture like a wild deer or something like that, say if it's a goat, okay, goat or whatever, and or your pet dog, and it's only like 1 hour left to sunset, just 1 hour. He's not going to die in an hour. And if he's just sitting there not doing anything, maybe just being noisy, man, let me out of here, just leave him in there, okay? Because it's just 1 hour and he's not tormented. He's not hurt in any way, nothing like that. He's just stuck in a hole. So then you could jump down in there after the Sabbath and pick him up. And get them out after the Sabbath. But if it's at the beginning of the day, it's going to rain, or there's heat or whatever, or way early in the night, yeah, you could get him out, because you might actually kill him by leaving him in there. And so you're allowed to get him out of there. Now, if it's if it's half filled with water and he's like, treading water, yeah, you need to get him out of there because he'll drown. And so, same with a well, the same thing, a hand-dug well. Now, I had a hand-dug well that was built, I don't know, in the 1800s, and there was no border, like no wall. Goats are notorious for jumping on everything, so I didn't have like the normal well wall, with the cap. It was just raw ground, like here it is, pop right in. I'm like, wow. So what I had to do is I put a barbed wire fence post in the ground, 3 of them, then put goat fencing around and stuff over the top, just so they won't get up there and nor in it. So there was a threat there, but here's another thing I had to deal with the farm. Like, say the goat did this all the time, drove me nuts. And mostly the mom, not mostly, the female goat I had did this all the time. We had like the metal cow fencing, which had squares like this, something like that. Where in other sections you'd have more of the goat sections like that. And so now the boys couldn't, the big horns were more out, they couldn't put their head in. So, but this female goat, her horns were more straight back. And so she could actually put her head in there, and she would, it's like the proverb, big time, the grass is always greener on the other side. I mean, I said that so many times to myself. And so it's kind of funny. But she would, a lot of times she could pull it back out. She'd figure it out, like cock her head and horns all the way back to her back and pull it out. But a lot of times, and it just so happened to be on Sabbath all the time, a lot of times was she couldn't get her head out. And I'm like, come on, dude. And so she would do that, whatever, variety of times, throughout the years. And so So I would have to go in there, because it'd be early in the day, and, she just eats whatever. She's fine and dandy at the beginning when she puts her head in there. She's just eating whatever, and it's just normal for her. But then she can't get it out. I'm like, come on. And so I have to, during the Sabbath, get her loose and scare her away from the fence, get out of here. And now, a few times, she did it like 1 hour to 45 minutes right before sunset. And I was like, you can just stay in there, you gotta stop doing that stuff. Learn your lesson. So, it might sound cruel for people who are watching, but that's kind of the mentality. And so she done it, and so she so I just left her there for 45 minutes left, and right at sunset I walked down there and let her go. But because she was not hurt, she was not banned, she was, whatever, still even pushing against the fence, trying to reach even further. It's ridiculous. But you could tell when she wanted out, she couldn't get out. But so anyway, you had to deal with that reality, and so and I made sure she wasn't getting cut or anything like that. So so she was fine, and but that's some of the stuff you have to deal with being a farm owner, small farm owner, and if you don't have the right fencing, because it costs money to put up a huge, 15-acre fence, So anyway, back in the day, I don't know how much they had to deal with that, because they made rock walls and things like that, and made little places for the, like they quarantined in a little area. So how high they made it just so they can't jump up there, I don't know. But anyway, so you had to deal with stuff like that. So you see how I talked about in high detail is before, how close to sunset, you have to judge it, is there a storm coming in, like this or that, and so it gets into high detail sometimes. You really need to deal with that. Like I say, here's another one. This happened to me one time in Mississippi. What happened? Okay, I had an oil lamp, and I didn't know how. This is the first time I used oil lamps. Didn't know anything about them, and so couldn't figure out the globe thing, and I figured it was just for moss or something. Yeah, so, here's like this, the dome, that dome where the oil lamp is, and the wick is right in there, and so the tad bit more, it fans out versus a small fire. So, and I couldn't figure it out, because I was that much of an airhead, I guess. And so, it's like, so I just took the globe off and just kept it like that. It's more of a candle, so it's kind of like that. And burned fine. Well, lo and behold, see, I was using a glass one. It was a glass base, and I got it so hot the whole thing just ignited, and I had it in the corner of the house right here, and it was all wood walls, and it just bent up, and it was billowing up fire real tall. I'm like, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. I say, well, it's Sabbath, so I had I wasn't gonna pick that up, and so I had foil, and I'm, so you have this, so here you have this situation where your house is in danger, and you and everybody else in the house. So I grabbed foil, which is not normally allowed for me to do, and I put foil over it, and I quenched it out like that, and snuffed it out, and so I was allowed to do that. But so that was a situation. Now, if someone's house is actually on fire, there are situations where you're allowed to put out the fire, but once that fire is out, you have to drop everything. I mean, everything. Like, you say, if you're doing by buckets, like back in the day, and there's a creek nearby. I had a creek, so we just pretend there's a creek. You could take buckets and run down there and come back, run down there and come back, and but once you see the fire's out, or someone yells to you, the fire's out, you have to drop everything. You see what I'm saying? Or So there's certain circumstances, you know, you can't just say let the house burn, you know, because keep the Sabbath. You know, you don't need to go that far. Same thing with war, you know, because our enemies back in the day would always conjure it because they know we rested on the Sabbath day, or like on, say, Yom Kippur, or, you know, a certain holy day. They would start a war during our holy days. And so, yeah, you can't just say, like in the book of Maccabees, they actually kept the Sabbath because they're not allowed to pick up a sword and fight on the Sabbath, so they thought. And so they got slaughtered. And so the Maccabean people, I believe it was them, excuse me, they said, we can't do that again. There will be none of us left. And so I was like, is this the first time they come across a situation back then? You know, this is the Maccabean time, like 167-ish, 180, somewhere around there. And, you know, 167-ish, you know, and so this can't be your first time, and now you're inventing it? Come on. And, so, yeah, so if war is happening, you know, but if it's more peaceful, no, don't go on the attack, you know, but if you see people start coming around and about to threaten you, yeah, you're allowed to defend yourself. You know, or like say a wild animal is coming. And there's another one that's not in the Torah. Let's say, like say you have a goat, like I did. There would be, near my property, there's cougars, bears, bobcats, and feral dogs and coyotes. I mean, you could hear the coyotes at night, and then you could also hear a pack of feral dogs, and I would actually see the feral dogs once in a while during the day, so my goats were always threatened. Now, never had a problem except for the dogs. And so, if I would see a, you know, feral dog or a coyote or something coming, you know, toward my goats or chasing my goats, I am allowed to exercise to a point where I'm sprinting down there to save my goat. That is allowed, but normally just sprinting and just, you know, exerting myself and hustling like that, no, I'm not allowed to do that. But there are these situations you are allowed to do. So here's all these oral stuff, okay? I'm way off from the biblical text, you know, but you have to understand these things come into play with real life. And so the spirit, you know, I know it's a Christian thing, but I mean the spirit of the law, the umph of the law, if you get the umph of the law, you can see why you have to add these things to help future generations or your kids, you know, what do you do in this situation during the Shabbat? And so, yeah, so there's certain things. So anyway, this, I guess you could just use this as part one, and maybe part two I'll get into this more. But, and maybe I'll kind of write all this down. So let's just use this, because I got deep already. I need to be carving. I got lots of stuff to do today. I'm already like an hour in, I think. Yeah, I'm right at an hour. So let me quit right now. This will be part one. And how to keep the Sabbath. What makes it holy. What you're allowed to do. What not allowed to do. How do you apply, you know, ordained oral law according to the Bible. And how you could add to the Torah kosherly. And how you could apply it today. And to make sure you keep it right. Alright, you guys, thanks for watching. I know I'm mumbling on, but hopefully we get through the gist of all this. And because it is like it's a very important commandment. It's done every week. You know, every 7 days you got to observe the Sabbath, and it holds a capital offense crime. And so that's why you want to, it has such a high priority, especially during the theocratic monarchy days, okay? And So it holds that much importance. So we got to get it right. So, all right. Thanks you guys for watching. Love you guys. Hit that like button, the subscribe button, and I'll make part 2 hopefully soon. I don't think I'm gonna edit too much of this one. I'm just gonna put my heading on here, like the kids at the Wailing Wall, before and after, and the subscribe button. That's about it. All I'm gonna do, and just so you can watch it with me. All right, appreciate you guys for watching. Now I need to get to work. All right, bye.